Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, follow me on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hey everyone, Happy New Year. It's Meredith. I wanted to let you know that applications are still open for the Wildheart Women's Retreat on the Big Island of Hawaii this April 2020. If you missed our last episode, you can re-listen to that with Kelly Robinson, who I'll be leading the retreat with this April. Join us for yoga, snorkeling, swimming with dolphins, sound healing, cacao ceremony in one of the most beautiful places in the world. Beauty really brings us into our heart. Being with Mother Earth, falling in love with her, and witnessing her beauty calls us into right action and choices. We're putting together this retreat both for healing and rest and sisterhood, but also because it's an opportunity to invite others to share in this beauty of our Mother Earth and begin a ripple effect of change. I believe we first need to develop our own relationship with the land. We need space to learn how to deeply listen and slow down enough to find the answers in our own heart of how we can give back and contribute in this world, our planet, and use our words and actions for change. I see now it's so important to rest, to feel, to cry, to be brought to our knees in awe of how incredibly beautiful this planet is. And when we deeply connect to this kind of love, this grief, this passion, something inside of us is ignited. We can no longer sit and do nothing while destruction is happening. We can no longer turn our head the other way from the fires, the carbon emissions, all the garbage that is being put into the earth every day. And when we connect with that passion inside of ourselves, that's when we ask these deeper questions. What can I do to create change? Kelly and I are devoted to protecting this beautiful earth we walk upon. We're offsetting the carbon footprint of every woman's flight who comes to the Big Island retreat. We're closing the retreat on Earth Day, a time to reflect, connect, and strategize on how we can truly give back and create change. We hope you'll join us and that this retreat may serve as a catalyst on your path of healing and awakening. May this time to rest and witness beauty ignite your soul's passion and provide more clarity on how we may more fully love this world. So early bird pricing is available until February 15th. Visit risingwomanleaders.com/retreat for all the details. I also have another invitation for you. This year, I'm feeling the call to lead the first Rising Woman Leaders Priestess Initiation Program. So if you're curious about what is a priestess, what is the role of a priestess in this modern age, it's a big question to dive into. So I decided to create a whole live webinar just on this topic. It's called The Role of the Priestess in the Modern Age. It's going to happen on Wednesday, January 29th, 12 p.m. Pacific. And I'm going to be covering the archetype of the priestess, why this role is so needed at this time, 6 ways to restore the balance of the sacred feminine on this planet and dismantle the patriarchy from within, practices for energetic clearing, healing trauma, limiting beliefs, and ancestral wounds, tools to overcome fear and activate your soul gifts for world change. And you'll also get the first look inside the Rising Woman Leaders 2020 Priestess Initiation. So if you want to join us for that live webinar, it's risingwomanleaders.com/webinar. All the details to sign up are right there. And if you're listening to this after the live date, the replay will be available. So still go to the link risingwomanleaders.com/webinar. Find all the details to sign up. I look forward to seeing you there, and I hope you will enjoy today's show. I'm here today with Michele Bumbier, who is a nature-based educator, a devotee of the Great Mother, researcher and gardener living in the humid subtropics. She works to benefit all beings by bringing humans into right relationship to the land through regenerative gardening. She also spends her time researching and studying the sacred feminine, particularly the life and legacy of Mary Magdalene. She feels there is a strong resonance between women's work and earth work and focuses her heart in devotion to these areas. You can usually find her propagating rare plants with her beloved or contemplating the lives of the women she holds dear to her heart. So thank you for being here today, Michele.
Thanks, Meredith. I'm really excited to get to talk to you today.
Yeah, and we were mentioning this a little before we started the recording, but it seems like there has just been this awakening and this pull, especially on the social media realms, where all the women who are on a similar path are feeling the call of the divine feminine, feeling the call of especially Mary Magdalene. We're finding each other. And it's so special that this has really just started happening in the last couple of years, for me at least. And I wonder if you want to just speak anything to that and just what is happening in our world right now and people waking up and all the technology that is helping us find each other.
Oh, wow. This is such a beautiful question. I was thinking of this on my walk home from my community garden today, of this kind of shared global experience that we're having, that is this awakening. We are waking up in a myriad of ways on so many levels, whether it's political or cultural or religious, spiritual. People are feeling things shifting, and Mary Magdalene, for me, really represents the feminine awakening. She is kind of for me, she is that role model that I so desperately wanted as a young woman. And I'm so grateful to have connected just with this woman who was very much alive over 2,000 years ago. And it's amazing that now her legacy is the dust is being wiped off of these stories, and we're all seeing it come alive again. So for me, she represents the liberation of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a spiritual woman, what it means to be devoted to your beloved, and what that might look like, and what it means to live a life of service. So this awakening that we're seeing really is, there's no accident, and to see the feminine unfurl before our eyes is so incredible. And that correlation with Mary Magdalene and all these different stories coming up, I feel that there's no mistake there,
Yes, it's powerful. And it feels, like we're in a really important time right now. And it just makes me feel like this weaving and this awakening. And but I'd love to have some context for people listening of just, maybe you could share a little bit of who Mary Magdalene is in your eyes, or through your eyes, and also how you came to find her.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I really love this subject. I love speaking about Mary Magdalene because, like I said, she was a real woman. She's not a goddess far off in the clouds. She walked this earth. And so for that reason alone, she is so relatable to me. So some background here. I grew up Christian. I went to Sunday service, and Wednesday there was always a Bible study. And I think I have this unconscious well, a memory that's been made conscious, but I think as a child I didn't really recognize. I definitely had an issue that there weren't women in these stories. Was learning all these stories about Jesus, which were exciting, but I was kind of disappointed. And it was only as I got into high school and, I asked my mom, do I have to go to church anymore? And she was like, no, if you don't like it, you don't have to go. And I'm so grateful that my mother kind of just allowed me to be very expressive, be very inquisitive, be very curious. And it wasn't until around that time that I started exploring women's spirituality and what that means and why weren't women represented in at least the religion that I was brought up in. And so I went down this whole path of like goddess spirituality, and it was very interesting, and I'm still very interested in it, but there wasn't a lot of connection for me. It was more so just beautiful. And so probably about 4 years ago, I could say that I was having a little bit of an identity crisis or I kind of joke around that I was born with an existential crisis, like, what am I doing here? What is going on? And I kind of was struck with one of those, but it had a very spiritual connotation to it. And this is around the time that I really started taking my studies with Buddhism very seriously. And I noticed, where are the women in Buddhism? Like that was another big issue that came up for me. And I realized the core wound that I was carrying was that I didn't feel that people like me were being represented, or a woman like me was being represented. And so I was like, well, I need to go back to my roots. So I, for some strange reason, I opened up the Bible and was like, I'm going to find something in here. I was so determined. And Mary Magdalene's name popped out at me. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. I don't remember her growing up. And so I started reading anything I could about Mary Magdalene. And a lot of the fictional tales and a lot of these novels and these embellished stories about her. And over the course of maybe a year and a half, I started to feel like there was a lot of differing opinions about her life and what she did and who she was. And then, of course, I came across the Da Vinci Code, and I was very intrigued, but also confused. Like, why do so many sources say so many different things? And then I got into, the channeled material about Mary Magdalene, and I was like, okay, wait a second. What do I think? Where do I stand in all of this? So you mentioned in the intro that I shared, I'm a very diligent researcher and I don't quit until I feel very satisfied. And so I put all of the fictional information and stories that I was coming across, I put them away, and I took time, and I was like, okay, all this chaos has to settle somehow. And that's when I really came into contemplation, because I'm a very cerebral, intellectual person, and I do a lot of thinking, and I admittedly need to do a lot more feeling. And so I put all these books down and started feeling into and contemplating, okay, what does all this mean? And I started to feel this like discernment barometer come alive in my body. And I was like, oh, okay, this feels resonant with me and my story, and this doesn't. And then I learned, oh, there's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And this really, really excited me because I had read so many fantasies about her. And so I found the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which was discovered in Cairo in the year 1896. So that's about 50 years before the infamous Nag Hammadi library was uncovered, the Gnostic text that we hear of, and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene blew my heart open. I was like, wow, okay, I don't even need the fantasies anymore. This is mystical enough. And so I think it was around early last year that I created Magdalene Rising, the Instagram account that I just started. I was learning so much and I needed to put it somewhere. And it actually ended up being really, really nourishing and fulfilling. And so it was through that account that I started to see the importance of really studying the historical things that we can infer about Mary Magdalene's life, and not to get lost in the fantasy and not to get lost in the channelings and the stories, which are fun. But I wanted something practical. I wanted something tangible and something truthful that resonated with me. And so her gospel really just, to this day, I was sitting with her gospel before we got on our interview, and I was just like, this is so holy. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I'm at now, is I keep my contemplations based on historical texts now, and that seems to be really, really nourishing. And I don't get so lost in the stories now.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Would you be open to reading something from the gospel just so people can get an idea of what's in there?
Absolutely. Yes. I was hoping you would ask this. So for those that are not aware, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene gives this beautiful mystical teaching from Mary Magdalene's perspective. And for me, I feel like this is a huge missing link in the Christian story. And so I will read from page 10 of the manuscript. And it starts, let's see where I'm going to start. Here we go. I'm going to read this page and then we can talk a little bit about it. Peter said to Mary, "Sister, we know that the teacher loved you differently from other women. Tell us whatever you remember in any words he told you, which we have not yet learned." And Mary said to them, "I will now speak to you of that which has not been given for you to hear. I had a vision of the teacher, and I said to him, 'Lord, I see you now in this vision.' And he answered, 'You are blessed, for the sight of me does not disturb you. This is where the new lies. This is where there where is the noose lies the treasure.' Then I said to him, 'Lord, when someone meets you in a moment of a vision, is it through the soul that they see, or is it through the spirit?' And the teacher answered, 'It is neither through the soul or the spirit, but the new between the two, which one can see in the vision.'" And then pages 11 to 14 are actually missing. And so I chose to read this passage because it says so much. First of all, we have Peter asking Mary, share something with us, because he knew Mary had information that they didn't have, that they weren't privileged enough to have. And that alone tells me that she had a very significant relationship with him. And a woman that I really, really admire, that I'd love to share, is Cynthia Bourgeau. She's an Episcopal priest and a modern day mystic, as she calls herself. And it is through her that I really learned the depth of Mary Magdalene. And she has a wonderful book called The Meaning of Mary Magdalene, Discovering the Woman at the Heart of Christianity. And it's one of my favorite books. And so it was really through her guidance, because I took a course with her, that opened my eyes to see that this relationship that Mary and Jesus had, it doesn't matter if it was sexual. What matters is that that they had a very significant connection. And that's what the beginning of this passage really infers, is that we know that the teacher loved you differently from other women. And I thought that that was so telling of that beautiful relationship that they shared. And then another key thing about this passage that I would love everyone to know is that she says, "Lord, I see you now in this vision." And he replies, "You are blessed, for the sight of me does not disturb you." And that little piece right there where he says, "For the sight of me does not disturb you," it tells us today, in order to have these mystical experiences, we need composure. We need to be able to find our sacred center, and through the visionary state, whatever that may be coming from, we have to find that place of stillness so that we can receive the message through all of the surrounding things that might be distracting us about that vision. Because when the visionary state comes, it's very easy to get distracted because everything is so beautiful or interesting, or it really grabs your attention. But she was in that state specifically for him to receive a teaching. And so this also says that she could access him beyond the physical. That, okay, yes, Jesus died, but he's also still very much alive for her, because their relationship transcended the physical. And that to me really says the depth of their love and of their union. And he says, "There where is the nous, Nous, lies the treasure." So that visionary experience, the space between all of the chaos, is actually where we can receive the teachings in a visionary state. At least that's what I was getting from it. And something else that's really notable about that particular part is that he's actually complimenting her. And he sees that she's steady. He sees that she's maintained composure. And that's exactly why she was his beloved, in whatever capacity that may have been. That's exactly why she was right there at the cross when he died, right there at the tomb when he resurrected. It's because she got it. She not only talked the talk, but she could walk the walk. And that says so much to me.
Thank you for reading that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that little stutter there. I have notes all over this page, and I had crossed something out and I was like, what does that say?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting to see how much can be just read between the lines and really taken from such a short passage. Yeah. I wanted to tell you that one of the ways I've been connecting with Mary Magdalene has simply been writing. I have this journal. Actually, I'll show it to you because you can see. It's a red journal. And the only thing that I write in here are letters to Mary Magdalene. And
I love that.
And then she writes back to me.
Oh, wow.
And so I just say, "Dear Mary," and I share about just what's going on in my life or where I could use support, or I ask her questions, or I express gratitude, and then I write on the next page, "Dear Meredith." And I just internally shift into if I were not writing this, if I were, stepping aside and allowing this guidance to move through me and almost just feel her unconditional love, and I just write. And in the moment, it's like, okay, wow, okay, that's helpful. But when I go back and read some of them, or I read it to my partner, and he's just like, whoa, that's really profound. It actually feels like something is coming through. And
Wow.
That's been such a beautiful practice of mine. And I haven't really done this of just to sit and go back and read some of them, but from early on be interesting. But yeah, I was curious, just what are the ways that you connect with her now, and how any other contemplative practices or things that you invite people to begin that relationship?
I want to say that I love your journaling idea. I think that's so special, and I might try doing that. Yeah. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Something that I have found to connect with Mary Magdalene, my connection to her, is actually going for really long walks in nature. I can feel my mind softens. And like I mentioned, I'm a very intellectual person. And so sometimes I can be a little bit too in my head, and going out onto a trail or going into the forest or even just at the community garden or in my backyard and having my feet on the bare soil or on the leaves or on the grass or on the sand at the beach has been a way to clear my mind. And then I started noticing I would go on these long walks, and it was like my mind would be free, and then I would kind of just start to, I don't know how to describe it. It just felt like I was walking with my friend. I was walking, it feels like I'm walking with a friend, like I'm walking with a sister. And sorry, none of you can see how cute this little cat is that keeps coming up to the microphone. That was too cute.
We have a cat door installed in my bedroom now, and our neighbor's cat just like loves it and comes in at all the most funny times.
Oh, that was amazing. Yes, my cat is right here too, and he keeps looking at me and like pawing at me like, why aren't you petting me? Oh gosh, I needed that good laugh. Okay. So I started noticing on these long walks, I felt the presence of a sister, like I was walking in communion with a feminine force that was next to me. And this started happening around the time that I was really getting into the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I was reading the Gospel of Thomas, and I was like, oh, Mary? And I just kind of started having this like open dialogue. And I was just talking to really the space. I would just walk and talk kind of to myself. But I found myself similar to you writing to Mary Magdalene. I would find myself just kind of talking to her. And she became this like big sister figure, this figure to me, a very practical support, a listening ear where I didn't feel like I could necessarily talk to my best friend or my mother or my partner. I just felt so held in this energy, and it sounds interesting to maybe someone, but for me it feels similar to when people feel like they're talking with Jesus. It's a very similar relationship, and I would say for me even stronger. So walking in nature, I feel very much a communion with her. And I've also had some really profound dreams. I'm not too much of a dreamer. My sleep is very deep, probably because my mind runs so fast all day. But there have been a couple instances where I just feel like I am in the actual presence of this woman. And she has shared really interesting things with me. And that could just be my own reflection or my own projection. But for me, they're really special. So walking, dreaming, and of course, I love to take any of the books that I'm reading about her, and I do bibliomancy, where you close your eyes and connect with like a question or a feeling or something that you really want to know, and you kind of pick a random page, and whatever my eyes first land on, I kind of use that as a focal point for my contemplation. And so I started doing that with her gospel, and that was really special. And I do that from time to time, and it always leads me to really, really big aha moments.
Love that. Yeah. And I know that tending the earth is a big part of your life as well. And I'm curious what that relationship has been just weaving with the sacred feminine and what you've been learning about all of that together?
Yeah, this is honestly my favorite thing to discuss with anyone who wants to listen, because for me, earth work is very similar to women's work. I mean, we're tending to things, we're working with fertility, we are putting our hands in the depths, the darkness. And the earth, for me, has always expressed itself in the form of a mother, a lover, a sister. And I know that for other people, that might not be their experience. So for me, though, I've always felt a very close motherly bond with the land and with my gardens. And there's definitely masculine aspects. And I do believe that there is a beautiful spectrum that exists in nature. But oftentimes for me, when I'm working with the earth, I very much feel women. I feel my maternal lineage. I feel my mother, my grandmother, all these connections to women that I really look up to, like Mary Magdalene, like Lama Tsultrim Elione. And it's a time for me to commune with my own feminine essence. And I feel strong, but I also feel soft, and I feel held, and I also feel like I am caring for something at the same time. So it's just this beautiful reciprocal relationship that feeds me on ways that I've never even been in a relationship with a person that fed me the way that the earth feeds me. So tending the land as an act of devotion for me feels like, for my life, the most revolutionary thing that I could possibly do, because we see that there's a lot happening on our planet right now, and there are a lot of opinions about what's happening. And for me, it's, okay, we can debate all day, but what are you actually doing about it? And that's the question I started asking myself is, okay, well, I can research all I want, and I can read all the books and debate with all the people, but if I'm not actually putting myself into action, then I'm not really being of service. And so I got into gardening, and it felt just very ancestral. It felt very natural. It felt right. And every day I tried to get out into my yard or at the community garden that I work at, or teaching a class with people. And I just try to get people to understand that the land needs us just as much as we need the land. However you identify with the land is between, the individual and the piece of land that they resonate with. But the fact is that you get out there and you get your hands dirty and you are of service to something bigger than yourself. And that's kind of how it all started for me. And then when I would feel this presence of Mary Magdalene, actually while I was in the forest walking, I was like, oh, wow, okay. And the presence of just the feminine spirits, like the dakinis and the devas and all these beautiful feminine energies that we hear about in mystical traditions. And I was like, whoa, okay, this actually is very real and very alive for me. So it just felt like working with the earth was what I meant to do.
Yeah. And it just takes that time of tending to it and dropping the mind and starting to, open up to that deeper connection of just all the spirits that are there with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And the land is, you said it right there, all of the spirits, it's so alive, and everything has something to say. Everyone has something to say. And that was also a shift in my language that I had to make. Instead of being like, oh, that tree over there or that thing over there, I started to, personify nature, because everything has sentience in some capacity. It just might be very different than ours as human beings. And so I started to change my language, the way I thought, and then the way that I interacted with nature. And I was like, wow, that stream is very talkative, or that tree just definitely, gave me a flat out lesson, or that mountain definitely scolded me. And I thought that I was a little wacky. I will tell you that. And then I started talking to people and I was like, this is a basic human experience. I'm not special that I talk to nature. This is something that we all are capable of. It's just hidden underneath so many layers of distraction.
Yes. I'm curious what your ancestry is.
So I love this question too. You ask great questions, Meredith. My wonderful mother is from Borinquen, or what we call Puerto Rico. And so I have Taino roots, which are the indigenous people who first greeted Columbus and his crew of goons. So I have Taino ancestry. I have a little bit of Spaniard and Portuguese. They were the ones that came to the Caribbean to quote unquote explore, and we know how that went. And then on my father's side, I am fully Latvian.
Wow.
Yeah, that's at least from what he has shared with me and from what, family has told me. So I know that I am Baltic, like straight up. And so for that fact alone, I recognize like, wow, I am a predominantly Eastern European woman living in a country that, is somewhat foreign to me, and also feeling like very much at home. I live here in South Florida. And I actually feel the closest with my mother's side of the family. And I think that's because I grew up with her. I grew up in a very loud, vibrant Puerto Rican household. And so I wasn't close with my father growing up. So, until very recently, I only really ever acknowledged the fact that I was Puerto Rican. And then I started doing my own ancestral research, and I was like, wow, kind of just like everybody else, I appear to be a mutt.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to feel the way that these cultures dance within me, and just what I feel resonant with, what feels alive for me. And I can definitely say that I'm very much a tropical baby. I don't know where the Baltic is inside of me, but I don't feel it because I do not like the cold.
Oh, yeah, it's so interesting. I've been curious more about ancestry and recently did one of the DNA tests, just to see if anything new came up. And my partner has really been discovering his Jewish roots, being something that wasn't something he was raised with, but there's something so deep, I think, when it's in your ancestry, and he's starting to find community in that, and where it's just really beautiful. Like, and also we carry so much in our family lines. Like, I was just reading an article yesterday about epigenetics and just like traumas or things that have happened. Of course, like, we hold them in our bodies. And I think a lot of the work right now for many of us spiritual, sensitive beings is like healing for our ancestral lines.
Oh, I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I very much feel that. I love this resurgence, this excitement of not only the feminine, not only earthworks, but ancestral understanding. I think it's so important because I know that cultural appropriation is a huge topic, and it's a huge issue. And it's actually really inspiring to recognize that we all actually come from really special places on the planet. Everywhere on this planet is precious and so beautiful. And wow, when I started researching Latvia, I started weeping, and I started listening to Latvian folk songs, and I was just beside myself. I remember driving up to Central Florida where my family lives, and it's about a 3-4 hour drive from where I live now. And I was hysterical because I just was like, wow, this is so stunning. And I, for so long, didn't really honor it because I didn't have a connection to my father. And also a quick little interesting fact is that Latvia was, along with Lithuania, were the two last countries to be conquered by the church and to also be adopted into the European Union. So their language is so ancient and really retains a lot of its quirks and nuances that a lot of languages have been lost. And so I know with Latvia specifically, they have the oldest and largest library of folk songs. And I know that songs and verbal stories were a part of the culture for many people, for thousands of cultures across the country. I mean, actually, probably for across the world. Every culture was an oral tradition until they weren't, And so when I learned that, I was like, how do I possibly learn Latvian? Yeah, it's fascinating. So I think that it's really inspiring to see people becoming excited about their ancestry and, of course, honoring other traditions and being respectful, especially when we resonate with other cultures. But knowing that we don't have to steal anymore. We don't have to try to make something our own when we have something that's already ours and no one can take it from us. So I'm excited that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely something worth looking into for anyone listening who hasn't, gone on that path. I mean, even just, talking to parents, grandparents, seeing what we can learn there. I wanted to ask you about just the role of the priestess. And I do think of Mary Magdalene. She walked this earth as a priestess and held an energetic frequency that was really about love and embodied that and lived that and walked that and that path of service. And we're in very different times now. And I've been thinking a lot about that and having conversations with women about what is it to be a priestess in this modern age? And for any of the women that do hear that word and feel that calling, and there's just something in them that's like, yes, what does that look like in our world now? And I'm curious your thoughts on it.
I think that's such a big title. But it's also not. It's also just as simple to start integrating into our lives as priest. I think a priestess is someone that doesn't mediate the divine for other people like a priest. Traditionally we think of as a priest is the mediator between God and all of us people down here. But a priestess is really someone that reminds people of the holy. And the other day I was talking with a girlfriend about this, and she was like, what do you think of the word priestess? And I was like, well, there are two ways to think about it. One is that there is this idea that a priestess is like this mystical, I want to say like the Instagram priestess. Mm-hmm. It's a interesting movement that we're seeing. And I question, it brings up questions of authenticity for me. And so for me, I started thinking about priestess as, well, what kind of priestess am I? Because I feel like if you resonate with the word, that's important. And so the title. So I was like, I think I'm a practical priestess. I think that I'm a very practical person. And so my priestessing has to be practical. I don't want to inconvenience my life. And I also want to invite the sacred into my mundane, into the everyday life. And for me, that's practical. How can I create ritual and hold ceremony in a way that's not an inconvenience? Or I was doing air quotes there. How can I hold space for people and remind them of their own holy nature through earthworks and things that are very tangible, things that are very present and alive for us here? It doesn't take an intense visionary experience to feel like how sacred and holy the ground that we walk upon is. And so that's where my priestessing comes into play. And I think that the more ethereal and like magical and energetic priestessing is valid. I also think that there needs to be a lot more action-oriented priestessing. I want to see like priestessing as activism, and I do. I definitely see a lot of amazing women contributing to that movement, and it's a title kind of like witch. I mean, we're seeing an amazing revival of witch, and it's also very triggering because we as women hold a lot of wounding. Like we were just talking about epigenetics and ancestry. That is very alive, even for me. I mean, it feels very edgy for me to say, yes, I'm a priestess, but it also feels very right to say like, yes, I am a practical priestess. And I want to remind people that there are all different shades of priestessing and all different kinds of priestessing. And it's important that we claim that as individuals with authenticity, with integrity. Like I would never claim personally something that I didn't have my own visceral experience with. And with the word priestess, with the title priestess, I feel like I personally can work my way to feeling very comfortable with that title because it just feels super alive for me. And so I mentioned earlier feeling in my body this discernment meter. It feels like what is really yes in my body, what feels safe, what's a no, what feels threatening. And so when things like this come into my awareness or come into my space, I kind of put it through the test of my discernment, my level of discernment. And so priestess passed my own inner test. And I was like, yeah, I feel like I can carry that in this lifetime, but in my own unique way. So the resurgence of priestessing, I think, is absolutely incredible and so very needed and very much a mark of the feminine rising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many different angles, and we each have our unique essence and blueprint that we bring into our life, and it may not look like what some may think it will look like. And I think Mary Magdalene and a lot of your posts and other things I've seen people post too, it's like really reminding us of the depth of service. Like I really think of that when I think of priestess now too. It's like one who is here to serve. And I
love that.
I read a book once that just kind of reminding, like, we think this might be some really pretty title, but the priestess is the one like scraping the candle wax off the floor at the end of the night after like holding a ritual or just
absolutely. I love that you said, priestessing is something that needs to be an act of service and something that needs to come from the heart. And I feel like if that's anyone's perspective, bless, like honestly bless. And I really do feel that Mary Magdalene held that title. Absolutely. Because she genuinely, I feel, was a woman of service and devotion. And that's it. That's what a priestess is, a woman of service and devotion, you know?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm just curious if there's anything that you're excited about in your business or anything that's coming up or anything you want to share with people. I know people can find you on Instagram, magdalene.rising, and follow along. But anything else you want to share?
Yeah, thanks for that invitation. Magdalene Rising is a really exciting space for me to be able to connect with everyone. And I love talking with you all on there. So definitely be on the lookout at Magdalene Rising, because for the last 3 years, I've done a novena every year around her feast day. It's a 9-day devotional to Mary Magdalene, and I'll probably do it again this year. And so that's definitely something to look out for. I also started putting out little, I was calling them like thought processes or sound blurbs on SoundCloud in relation to Mary Magdalene. And those seem to be really resonating with a lot of people. So people can find that link on that Instagram handle as well. But the work I'm most excited about is the Earth Student. And you can look that up at the.Earth.Student. And this is my nature-based educational platform with my partner, where we teach in person mostly. We do a lot of work here in South Florida. So if you're here in the West Palm, Miami, Lake Worth area, we work in community gardens and at local parks, and teaching people the essence of herbalism and permaculture and regenerative gardening, and how to be more self-sufficient, and how to live a devotional life with the earth. And I'm very excited about that. And we also have a mentorship program that is a mentorship program that helps people get into their own personal spiritual connection to the land, and what that looks like for the person as an individual. And so the mentorship that we came up with is really kind of a journey to see how can we more deeply and intimately connect with the land, and through what avenues. So anyone can find that on that handle at the Earth Student.
Beautiful. Do you have any closing words or anything you want to leave people with today before I end with a short prayer?
Absolutely. I would love to invite people to use their own discernment when coming across any information, when listening to someone else speak, when seeing something new for the first time. Try to discover a sense of discernment within your body. And it really helps to be on the earth when you do that. It feels really grounding. And for me, that's a really great way to ground. And so I think that the more discernment we can cultivate as individuals, the more integral and honest and beautiful offerings we can bring forth in service to the benefit of all beings. So discernment, that's what I want to leave you all with.
Thank you. Let's take a moment to just close our eyes and just breathe. Just recognizing, remembering that we all have our connection to source. We all have this connection to the earth and to those whispers of the land, and to the ancestors and to the spirits. And as we live in a world with so much information and so much that we're constantly inputting, just taking that moment to be with your breath and your body, and to find that discernment within yourself, to find your original source connection to what is true for you. With much gratitude, I'll bring my hands to my heart and just thanking you, Michele, for sharing your wisdom with us today. Thank you for being here. And to everyone listening, just may you continue to walk your path with integrity and grace and discernment. Namaste.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.